Chapter 7 The Weight on His Shoulders. Lincoln extended his arm. He quickly put it down and sighed. He extended it once again, almost making contact, but his left hand grabbed his right wrist, stopping himself. He let out a groan of impotence, not believing that his own body could attempt to stop him from doing such a simple task. Frustrated, he rested his back on the wall, sliding all the way down to the floor, starting to think that maybe he wasn't really ready for this. The sound of digital bells made him look up, only to find that he had finally pressed the doorbell with his head while sliding down the wall. He immediately got up and walked away 2 steps from the door, combing his hair with his hand and trying to look casual. He took a deep breath to calm himself down. Once, twice, all while mentally repeating himself that it wouldn't be that hard. He could do it. He totally could do it. He was the boss. He had thought about what he would say, about the best way to approach the subject. He hadn't found a magic solution or one that fully convinced him that everything was going to be okay, but he had something to work with. He impatiently waited for less than 20 seconds, although it felt longer than that time when he was trying to buy his tickets for Smooch. He heard the sound of footsteps getting closer and the key scraping the metal of the door lock. Suddenly, all his confidence faded away from him. What had he been thinking? He wasn't ready for this yet. Maybe if he ducked to the nearest bush, he could hide himself and come back later. Deep inside him, however, he knew that he couldn't hide the truth from the people he loved. He wasn't ready to tell his sisters yet, but he needed to start trusting in other people. And who was better to start than the person he trusted the most in the whole world? The door finally opened. "Lincoln?" "Hey, Clyde," greeted Lincoln. His best friend looked the same as always, his dark hair in an afro that had not even had a single hair out of shape, being constantly revised by his father's. The same black trousers and his classic yellow and blue striped shirt. The same thick glasses and the same smile as always, maybe a little wider than usual. They knew each other for so long that Lincoln almost considered him as an unofficial brother. He was the only person he knew that liked the exact same things he liked, with whom he could share absolutely everything. And Lincoln needed someone to share all those things that were going through his mind. "Where have you been?" Clyde asked, excitedly approaching him, happy to see his best friend again. "It's been 2 days. You don't go to school now, and you're not answering my calls. Did you run out of batteries?" "No, actually, I couldn't answer." "Didn't you call my house?" he asked, confused. He was expecting his best friend to know that he had been in the hospital. He knew his family would have told Clyde, had he asked. "I called twice to your house, but Lori picked up the phone and I passed out," he admitted, looking embarrassed on the floor. Lincoln couldn't help but smile. He actually didn't like the fact that Clyde was so in love with one of his sisters. He didn't like any boy to be in love with them, really. But in Clyde's case, being such a platonic love interest, that would never actually be a thing. He didn't really care that much. And he actually had fun seeing how nervous his best friend got at the mere mention of Lori's name. "Then why didn't you go to my house and ask me for yourself?" he asked again. "I don't know. I didn't want to risk Lori opening the door. But that didn't answer my question. Why didn't you go to school these past few days?" Lincoln sighed once again. He was starting to act more like Lucy lately. "Can we go to your room?" "Sure. Make yourself at home. But take off your shoes before stepping on the carpet. And try not to scream, as you always do when you enter someone else's house." Clyde guided him to his room so that they could speak quieter. Lincoln heard some movement in the kitchen, where he assumed Clyde's dads were cooking. He realized it was nearly lunchtime, and he wondered if he arrived at a bad time. Even more, maybe he should be in his house too, having lunch with his sisters. How come he didn't realize that? "Clyde, were you about to have lunch?" he asked. "My dads were cooking, yes. Why?" he said, still walking down the hall to his room. Maybe I should come later. Why? Dad! He yelled, turning around on his heels. Yes, son? Said both Harold and Howard McBride, poking out from the kitchen not even 1 second after their son had called them. Can Lincoln stay for lunch? Of course, Harold said with a big smile on his smooth voice. I hope you like sushi. Tuesdays are Oriental Food Day, said Howard, who was wearing a white headband with Japan's flag in the center, combining with his red hair. They went back to the kitchen before Lincoln could say anything, and Clyde quickly entered his room. Lincoln sighed. The McBrides were a really happy family. They never seemed to be nervous or angry. They were always happy. Clyde had never said a single bad thing about his parents, and he never came to Lincoln with a family issue. He didn't envy them because Lincoln profoundly loved his family, but he always smiled when thinking just how different their families were. He entered Clyde's room. His friend was putting his stuffed animals in a wardrobe specifically designed for that purpose. Sorry about the mess. I just came home from school. Paper sheet. A single paper sheet was lying on the floor. That was Clyde's mess. Okay, so does this situation warrant a sound of water against the rocks, or is it more of a wind between the leaves of an autumn tree type? He asked Lincoln, testing the different options on his white-nosed device. Clyde. All right. What about some birds singing in the background? Clyde! Clyde jumped on his feet, startled. He looked around, looking worried. Lincoln took a deep breath to fight his nerves. He didn't want to be angry with his best friend, but lately he was having trouble controlling his emotions. He took one step forward and put a hand on Clyde's shoulder. Can we just sit down and talk? Clyde had never seen Lincoln's face so serious, and he believed he was seeing a little sadness in his eyes too. He may be a little naive, but he certainly knew when his best friend was in need, he would never fail him. He'd never fail Lincoln, his one true friend. In school, they hanged out with some other kids, but it was mostly due to them sharing classes and basically being forced to be with each other. No one even bothered to call him outside of school, unless it was to ask him for his homework. Lincoln could probably be friends with them. After all, he was really a really social guy, good with words, funny, and with energy for everything. Clyde had none of those qualities. He couldn't even talk to girls without feeling nervous. Meanwhile, just a few weeks ago, Lincoln had danced with the 4 dates his sisters had landed him to the Sadie's Hawkins dance, like it was no big deal. And then he had a date with Ronnie Ann in the arcades. Clyde sometimes felt like he didn't deserve a friend like Lincoln. Someone so unconditional and who could stand all of his flaws. He pondered what would happen if, for whatever reason, they fought and he stopped being his friend. It wasn't a nice thought. What happened, Lincoln? He asked, sitting on his bed. Lincoln sat on the other side. Clyde, I was in the hospital since Sunday. I just came back today. Clyde gasped. What? In the hospital? What happened? Were you sick or injured? Lincoln summed up what happened on Sunday morning and afternoon in the park, playing with Lynn. He described how he suddenly found himself having trouble breathing, with his head and chest aching like someone was ripping him apart. He explained in detail his blurry vision and the sensation that everything around him was happening in slow motion. I know that, Clyde interrupted, worried. It happens to me too. Those are panic attacks. You don't need to be scared. It can be treated. Dr. Lopez gave me some exercises to treat them. Maybe it's not that, Clyde. But what? What was it then? Clyde, look. I'm going to tell you something, but I'm asking you to not freak out. Could you do that? I wasn't, but now that you said it, I think I'm going to start freaking out. Clyde, I... His plans were proving infructuous. All the phases that he had come up with, were messing up his mind. One thing was picturing himself explaining everything to his best friend, and a very different thing was being right there with him, seeing his reactions. He knew it'd be hard, but not like this. Lincoln, you're scaring me, he sighed. Look, the thing is, I'm sick. Sick? Asked Clyde. Yes, it's a pretty difficult name. Neuromatosis fibrom... I don't know. It doesn't matter. Does that make you pass out? Not exactly, Clyde. I should have died on Sunday. Lincoln saw his friend visibly taken aback by his words, like someone had hit him in the face with a baseball bat. What? He shouted, standing up. What do you mean? I had a vein in my head obstructed, in my brain. It was about to kill me, but Lynn's ball hit me hard enough to, unblock it or something. And that saved me, he explained, trying to be as medically accurate as possible, but there were a lot of names and conditions he just couldn't remember. Are you serious? I mean, I know you're serious. I wouldn't be joking with something like this, but I can't believe it. You are about to die? Pretty close, actually, according to the doctors. Wow! Clyde said, sitting right next to his friend and putting an arm over his shoulder. I get why you didn't answer me now. I should have gone to your house and asked your parents about you. I would have visited you in a hospital. You would have had some troubles passing over my sisters, Lincoln chuckled. He and Clyde shared a laugh. I guess you're right. Remember that time when you had a paper cut? Unfortunately, yes. But hey, at least you're fine now. We were really lucky that Lynn hit you with her ball. I don't want even to imagine what would be of me if you were gone. Best friends forever, right? He said, extending his fist so Lincoln could bump it with his own. But Lincoln was just sitting there, staring at the floor, his lips tight in a grimace of concern. Slowly, Clyde's fist came down. Lincoln? It was now or never. He couldn't keep avoiding it. He had to man up and say it once and for all. Clyde, the doctors didn't cure me. His friend frowned. What do you mean? Why would they let you get out of the hospital if you're not healthy? Because they can't cure me. What? There's no cure for what I have. Clyde stared blankly at his friend. What? They gave you medicines, right? To control it so it doesn't happen again? No. They didn't. There's nothing that can help me. It's gonna happen again, and next time, I won't be that lucky. Clyde withdrew his arm from his friend's shoulder and stood up. He started walking to and fro inside his room, breathing agitatedly. He stopped in front of his desk and started to open his drawers, throwing indiscriminately to the floor every paper sheet, pencil, pen, and book he found while looking for something else. He moved on to a shelf and finally found his inhaler. He took the little device in his mouth and started breathing while pressing it. He held his breath for a few seconds and then breathed out. Lincoln just sat on his friend's bed, watching him repeat the process over and over again. Clyde, this can't be happening. Lincoln, are you sure they didn't make a mistake? They're doctors, Clyde. Doctors can be wrong too. Scientists can be wrong. Engineers can be wrong. Everybody makes mistakes, he screamed, still walking nervously around his room. You need a second opinion. Go see another doctor. Maybe a doctor from another state. A European doctor. Do you have your passport? I don't think they're wrong. The doctor who treated me seemed to be reliable. Jim Carrey is a reliable actor, and he's still the cable guy. Clyde, you have to calm down. You'll get an asthma attack, Lincoln wearily said to his friend. He knew how Clyde had problems breathing when going through violent emotional breakdowns. I'm already having an attack. said the boy, throwing his inhaler to the floor and pressing his index finger and middle finger against his throat, checking his pulse. Pulse accelerated, agitated breathing. I'm hyperventilating. Why, Dr. Lopez said agent 2. Paper bag. He once again ran to his shelf, throwing all his toys and comic books to the floor. He finally found a paper bag and put it over his mouth, breathing in and out with all his strength. Clyde, please. I don't like seeing you like this, Lincoln pleaded. Lincoln! You're telling me it can happen again! Clyde complained, messing up his hair with both hands due to stress. How can you prevent it? A diet? Some vitamins? Skipping gym class? Clyde, sit down. Lincoln, you're telling me that it can... Clyde, sit down. Don't tell me to sit down! Clyde, please, just tell me how you can prevent it! I can't! Lincoln screamed, standing up from his bed. He walked right up in front of his friend and took him by the shoulders. Clyde, I can't prevent it from happening again. But Lincoln, I have 2 weeks left to live, he finally said, looking at his friend's eyes through the glasses. Clyde's face contracted in the most eloquent expression of horror that Lincoln had seen in his whole life. His mouth seemed to be silently screaming. His eyebrows arched up, and through the glasses Lincoln could see his friend's eyes losing focus. Clyde stood there, petrified for a couple seconds, until his legs started trembling. Acting quickly so he didn't fall to the floor, Lincoln grabbed Clyde and dragged him to his bed, where he managed to sit him down. Clyde was still with his gaze lost, but his hands started shaking. His eyes focused once again on Lincoln. The white-haired boy didn't know how to react. He felt a terrible void in his chest that was wearing him down, like someone was slowly draining all of his energy. He didn't feel like crying, though. It was painful, but not as bad as he initially thought it would be. It was an odd sensation. He felt like he should be feeling worse. He even cried with Bobby, and that was just an hour ago. Maybe that's why he wasn't crying. Was his body getting tired of feeling so blue? It sounded both stupid and unlikely, but now that he thought about it, Lincoln realized he was indeed feeling tired. It wasn't just the emotional weight of seeing his best friend like that. It was another type of exhaustion, like something inside him was telling him that he needed to hold on, to stop acting so weak and vulnerable. Lincoln? Clyde's voice brought him back to reality. He turned around and saw his friend starting to tear up. Clyde? Lincoln! He yelled, throwing against his friend, hugging him like they were kids. He started to violently cry on his shoulder, flogging his own glasses and soaking Lincoln's polo shirt. The white-haired boy hugged him too, to try to comfort him. The bedroom door opened. Clyde, son, is everything okay? I thought I heard... Holy moly! What happened here? Said Howard as he entered, seeing the disaster in his son's room with all the things on the floor and, most importantly, seeing his son crying inconsolably. Clyde, what's wrong? Clyde separated from Lincoln and ran right to his father, burying his face in a salmon shirt, almost the same color as his hair. Howard hugged him with all his strength, stroking his back. What is it? Lincoln, he managed to say between the sobs. Howard hadn't seen his son cry this hard in years. He was getting scared. He turned his head and looked at Lincoln. Of course, he immediately discarded the possibility of Lincoln having intentionally done something that could hurt Clyde that badly. He was such a good boy. Why? Clyde shouted to his father's shoulder. Lincoln, what's going on? Lincoln saw how worried Mr. McBride was about his son. He knew that look, that desperation. It was the same expression that had greeted him in the mirror since last Sunday night. The very same expression he knew he had every time he thought about his sisters. He knew the sensation of wanting to protect her loved ones, and he understood how Mr. McBride felt. He hadn't really thought about telling Clyde's dads about his situation, but sooner or later they would have found out, and Clyde's dad needed an answer. Well, let me explain. "15 minutes later, Harold McBride was holding both his son and his husband, who were both inconsolably crying on his sweater. "Lincoln," Howard cried, blowing his nose on a silk scarf. "This can't be happening." Clyde was mourning too, while his father was cleaning his face. "Lincoln, I can't believe it," Harold said. Even he was managing to keep himself together better than the rest of his family. He was just as devastated after hearing the news. "I'm sorry," Lincoln apologized, not really knowing what he was supposed to do in a situation like this. "He's apologizing! He's apologizing for dying!" Howard cried painfully. "He's such a love. He's a good boy. Why is something like this happening?" "Howie, please calm down." "Dad, Lincoln's gonna die." "Clyde, dear, he's my only friend. I don't have anyone else." "Oh, come on, Clyde," Lincoln tried to intervene. "What am I going to do without you?" Harold didn't know what to say. He didn't have an answer for that. So he just hugged his son, trying to let him know that he was there for him. Then he looked at Lincoln. "Is there anything that can be done? Any treatment?" "It doesn't matter how expensive it is. We can help you," Howard rushed to say. "Lincoln, please be honest. If there's something to do, anything, we will help you. Don't be ashamed to say it." "I really appreciate that, Mr. McBride, Mr. McBee," Lincoln told both Clyde's dads. "But there's nothing that can be done. The damage on my heart has already been done, and they'll never give me the green light for a transplant because I still have the tumors in my head, and it'll just be a matter of time before it happens. If my heart doesn't kill me, my brain will." The McBrides were absolutely speechless after hearing Lincoln. The three of them remained hugging each other, sharing their sadness. Lincoln didn't know what to do. He was feeling extremely uncomfortable there, knowing they were all crying because of him. Maybe I should go." "No, don't leave!" Clyde begged, looking at his friend, afraid of losing him. "Lincoln, have lunch with us, please. We need you here right now," Howard said, also in tears. "Okay, I'll stay." "I don't think I'll be able to finish preparing the sushi," Howard regretfully said. "I think we better order something over the phone. What do you like, Lincoln?" "You don't have to worry about that. Just order whatever." "He likes pizza with double cheese and pepperoni," Clyde interrupted him. "He also likes double cheeseburgers and medium fries and peanut butter jelly and mustard sandwiches and vanilla, chocolate, and pistachio ice cream." "I'll order 4 of everything," Harold said resolutely, exiting the room. "Son, let's go wash our faces," Howard said, taking Clyde to the bathroom and leaving Lincoln alone in the now messy room. Lincoln just sat on the bed, covering his face with his hands. That had been a lot more tough than he had imagined. He didn't really want to stay. He'd rather go running to his house and lock himself in his room. Maybe there he could cry without any worries. He could keep himself away from the sadness of watching a family cry for him. He could escape from reality for a while, but he knew he couldn't do that. He had to face it, no matter how hard it was for him. He took out his phone and started looking for the group chat he needed. He had quite a few, from school to the comic store, but most were with his sisters. Different groups with different combinations of participants. He finally found the one group chat he shared with his 5 older sisters. "I'm at Clyde's. I told him. His dads want me to stay for lunch. Can you tell Mom and Dad to cover me from the girls?" His messages immediately were sent to all of his sisters. Accordingly, Luann was the first one to read it. So Lincoln waited for her to say something. But the minutes started passing by, and she didn't answer him. Soon enough, though, the rest of his sisters saw the messages. "You got it, bro. Eat the rich, Mel. Why aren't you coming home for lunch? We've been waiting 2 days for you!" "Don't worry, Lincoln. I'll talk with Mom and Dad. Have fun and take care." He wasn't happy at all with Luann's silence and Lynn's apparent anger. That only helped to make him feel even more guilty. But he didn't want to worry about that right then. Not with all the problems he already had. More immediate problems. With a sigh, he stood up and went to the dining room, wondering if this kind of stress might turn his hair even whiter. The sky was colored in the most beautiful orange tone Lincoln ever saw. It was clear, with just the right amount of clouds to be a little more poetic and to appeal to those who could paint it. Lincoln loved sunsets. He decided that before dying he had to see a sunset from a high place so he could better appreciate its effects, not only on the sky but on the city as well. Maybe he could go to the woods since they were on a hillside. He had been there since before with Clyde, when they tried to man up. Since appreciating sunset wasn't on their manly stuff list, they missed the opportunity. His sisters would probably be more than willing to help him fulfill that little wish. He soon arrived at his house, and just before opening the door, he found himself caught in the noisy mess he was used to. Lena was chasing Lenny with a frog on her hand. Lola was having a tea party in the middle of the stairs. Lily was crawling butt naked on the kitchen, and from Luna's room you could hear the power chords of a song. So far so good. He could even hear a disaster going on upstairs, probably caused by Lynn. He was grateful that everything was apparently normal. He decided to go to his room. He was starting to miss it. Being almost at his door, he saw Lena's frog passing by right in front of him. "Hops, don't be scared! Lenny wasn't gonna cook you!" was yelling the little one, running desperately to catch her pet. Reacting quickly, Lincoln crouched and caught the frog in the middle of a jump. "Here you go, Lena." "Thanks, Lincoln. Did you see our drawings in your room?" "I was about to check them." "I hope you like them. I don't mean to presume, but I think I'm trying better than Lola," she said with a smug smile. "In your dreams, maybe," yelled Lola, climbing up the stairs with one of her plastic cups, pretending she was drinking tea. "You forgot to draw Lincoln's ears," complained Lena. "And you didn't draw his nose. At least I draw him with his actual clothes and not a princess dress. It was a prince outfit. Well, he looked dumb." Lola glared at her twin sister with her teeth clenched. With a hatred gaze, she shook her plastic cup like she was throwing hot tea to her twin. Lena stared at her with a raised eyebrow. "Really?" she asked, impassively upon the imaginary attack. Lola seemed to be ready to punch her, but Lincoln, preventing the imminent danger, decided to act. "Hey, do you still have your cops' costumes?" he asked with a smile. "Yes," answered both twins at the same time. "You better suit up, because the animal criminals just escaped their prison," Lincoln dramatically said, taking Hops from Lena's arms and letting him go. "Oh no, now Hops joined them too." "Who did he join?" Lena asked with glistening eyes. "Why, the mascot mob, of course. Charles, Cliff, Geo, and Walt. But it seems they're recruiting other animals now. Oh, if only we had some kind of police officers who could catch them before dinner." "We can do that," said both twins, rushing to their rooms to put on their patrol suits. Lincoln smiled to his own idea. Having avoided a new fight between his sisters, he finally opened his bedroom door. Just one step inside, he already saw his little sister's drawings. They were hanging on his wall, and this showed him in different situations. At a tea party, fighting crocodiles, dressed like a prince, in a puddle of what he hoped was mud. And finally, a big one that showed him standing up, holding one twin on each hand. On top of the paper sheet, it read, "Welcome back." He was touched by that last drawing. Seeing all three happy faces, three stick figures holding hands, he realized just how much his sisters loved him. He took that paper sheet and put it on his chest. He was about to give it into his emotions and allow himself to cry once again when the door suddenly opened. He quickly put the drawing back where he found it, tried to recompense himself before turning around, seeing little Lisa staring at him with his typical bored look. "Hey Lisa, what's up?" He saluted her, hoping she didn't notice his watery eyes. "Lincoln, I would appreciate if you could come with me to my lab for a few minutes so we can discuss our plan for action, considering the circumstances." "Plan of action? Circumstances? What are you talking about?" Lisa sighed, adjusting her glasses. "I believe it's a topic you would rather discuss in my room, where we are 43.7% less likely to be interrupted by one of our sisters." Without giving him time to say anything, Lisa abandoned his room, entering her own. Lisa remained still with his face locked in an expression of confusion. He shrugged it off and finally went to Lisa's and Lily's room. After closing the door behind him, he noticed that Lisa's lab, always full of chemicals, test tubes, and weird gamma rays machines, were now full of machines that, strangely enough, reminded him of the ones that he had in the hospital. His sister was standing on a stool, preparing what looked like to be a very, 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 very big syringe. "Lisa, what's that?" Lincoln worriedly asked. "Clearly, this is a syringe, with which I will draw the blood samples I need from your arm veins," she patiently explained, as if she was teaching Lily the vowels. "What?" said Lincoln, stepping back. "No way, I'm not going to let you draw blood from me. Why would you even consider doing that? To find a cure for your disease, of course." Lincoln felt the air escaping his lungs like he had received a punch in the stomach. "Disease? You know?" he asked, dumbfounded. "Evidently." Lincoln slowly supported himself in the nearest wall and let himself slide down it. This was terrible. Had the older girls failed to hide it? Did any other of his younger sisters know? The twins seemed oblivious, but Lucy was nowhere to be found. Did she know? He started sweating. This couldn't be happening. "Lisa, how?" "I spent the last few days nourishing my brain with information regarding genetic conditions and alterations in the normal state of the human body," said Lisa, signaling a pile of the biggest books Lincoln had ever seen in his entire life. "In my last visit to the hospital, I managed to get a look at the tests they did to you, and what was that to suggest and what the applied treatment should be. Knowing your symptoms and the measures taken by the trained medical staff, it wasn't hard to deduce that you have a strange variable of the disease known as neurofibromatosis type 1. They all knew that Lisa was a genius, but this exceeded everything Lincoln would expect from her. His sister, in 2 days, had learned enough to diagnose what apparently was a very weird disease that doctors hadn't detected in 11 years. A lot of times, her experiments scared him and the rest of his family. But Lincoln was profoundly proud of his little sister. He was convinced that she would change the world eventually. In a family full of talents, Lisa was the one who held the most potential. Sometimes, some of her siblings might have gone jealous, but deep down they were all proud. But smart as she may be, Lisa was still a 4-year-old girl, and Lincoln knew that even though she was usually tried to conceal her feelings, she still got to them. It was just like with Lucy. She might shelter herself in her seriousness as much as she wanted to, but things affected her just like it did everyone else. "Wait, you didn't tell the others about this, did you?" he suddenly asked. "Judging by the emotional state of our 5 older sisters, it's safe to infer that they are already aware of the situation. If they decided not to tell the rest of our sisters yet, it is because they do not think it is a necessary course of action. Therefore, I don't find the need to communicate it neither." "Lisa, listen to me. This is serious. You can't let it slip like that. That time where I had chewing gum in my hair and you told Lynn. It's not like that. You can't let it out this time," he warned her, remembering that time. Lincoln. That time my mind had no room for such trivial occurrence. This, however, merits concentration. Lisa took a terrifyingly long needle and put it in the syringe, hitting it slowly with her fingers to remove any trace of air trapped inside of it. She looked just too calm, like it was an everyday situation. She may have found out his disease, but maybe she didn't know the consequences. Lisa, do you understand what's going to happen to me? Lincoln slowly asked. Absolutely. Given the state of your disease is currently in and the advance it already had on your organism, I estimate that your body will manage to resist between 2 or 3 weeks before your heart finally fails, resulting in a premature death. Why are you saying it so serious? Like you're reading it from a book? Lincoln asked her, feeling suddenly a little upset. Aren't you worried that I'm going to die? Lisa let the syringe aside and stepped down to the tools. She walked all the way to his brother, stopping right in front of him with her head up to maintain visual contact. She stared at him with seriousness in her eyes, although through her glasses Lincoln could notice a special glistening in her eyes, one that he didn't remember seeing in her little sister in a long time. Of course I'm worried about you, Lincoln. And that's why I've decided to postpone all my projects, researches, and even my professorship at the Royal Wood State University, so I can devote my full abilities, resources, and time to find a cure for this yet untreatable disease. 2 weeks is too short and too demanding term. This might be the most challenging task I've ever faced in all my 2 years of doing this, but never before was I obliged to use the 100% of my capacities. Failure is not an option. Therefore, the only logical and acceptable outcome is for me to be able to cure you. She sounded just like always. No one could ever notice the difference, but Lincoln somehow was able to distinguish the worry behind Lisa's words. He knelt down close enough to be at eye level with her, and he put a hand on her shoulder. Lisa, I don't want you to be under so much pressure. I need to find a cure for your disease, Lisa repeated, shaking her hand. It's the least I can do. After all, with all the years experimenting on you, I failed to notice the anomalies in your brain. Come on, you can't blame yourself for that. No doctor ever noticed there was something wrong with me. Still, I should have found it sooner. Now, I will compensate for my mistake in finding a cure for your condition. Lincoln sighed. In a way, his sister had just taken a great weight off his back. He hadn't found a way to tell her the truth. He now didn't have to gather an impossible amount of courage to explain a situation that overwhelmed him. Now he didn't have to see her cry for him as he thought he would. What he did fear now, however, was that Lisa had relieved him from some of his pressure by taking a heavier one for herself. The 4-year-old girl couldn't pretend to carry the responsibility of having to find a cure for this terrible, untreatable disease. She couldn't put herself in a position where she was the one responsible for her brother's destiny, feeling like it was her duty to save him. What if she couldn't do it? Would she live the rest of her life feeling guilty for letting him die? Lincoln would gladly spend 2 weeks of awful stress as long as her little sister wouldn't feel that way after his death. He couldn't stand the idea of Lisa blaming herself for a situation that was beyond any of them. Lisa, listen. You don't have to do this. It's not your job to save me. Are you saying you want to die? Perhaps there's a tumor affecting the brain area that controls the survival instinct. No, of course I don't want to die, I replied. Then I failed to see the problem. I believe we all win in this scenario. The problem is that you can't feel responsible for whatever happens to me. Do you understand? I tried to explain. If I die, it won't be because of you not finding a cure, or because you didn't diagnose me in time. It'll just be because I had bad luck, okay? You don't need to prove anything. If it makes you feel better, I'll let you take a blood sample from me. But, look, even if you don't manage to find a cure for me, you'll always be the most brilliant person I ever met. Alright? You'll always be my little genius. He smiled at her, trying to assure her that he always loved her. It's not like he doubted she already knew that, but a reminder once in a while didn't hurt anyone. He stared at her, trying to tell her what was going on in her head. Lisa then raised her arms, touching the one that Lincoln had resting on her shoulder. He smiled, believing his sister was going for a hug. Instead, he felt a painful pressure on his forearm. "Ouch!" he said, looking at the tourniquet Lisa had applied on him with the belt. "Lisa, what the heck?" "We need to apply pressure to restrict the blood flow and let the veins dilate, facilitating the act of inserting the needle," she simply explained, taking him by the hand and dragging him to the stool. Lisa took a syringe and a container the size of a juice jar. "All right, let's begin," she said with a mischievous smile. "After the blood draw, you'll need to fill this recipient." "What? With what?"